This video is about logic. Logic is extremely simple. In fact, the more rules and the more complications one gives in defining logic, the further away from the definition one is. In this video, I will present a complete definition and I will show two very common mistakes. I believe that these mistakes are made because people tend to accept established traditions. They tend to look at an authority and believe what the authority says without questioning them. However, in all matters rational, one cannot be a sheep. One cannot follow. There are no prizes for merely accepting an opinion. So, to move to the complete definition for logic. As I said, it's extremely simple. The definition for logic is the mechanism of consciousness. It's recognition of something, that is, experience reflecting back on itself to identify. In simplified form, the definition is a thing is itself and not what it is not. There is a further simplified form for this law that a thing is itself and not what it is not, and it's known as the law of identity in the symbolic form A equals A. Now, following from A equals A are other symbolic forms like A is not equal to not A. Not A is equal to not A, not A. A is not equal to A and not A, as well as A is not equal to neither A nor not A. Now all these other forms follow, and it should be obvious why. So this leads me to the first mistake, the first common error, is that the fundamental law for logic is the law of non-contradiction, which was expressed by A is not equal to not A. It should be obvious that this law, this symbolic form, only follows from A equals A. It cannot be primary or more fundamental than that. For those of you who found it difficult to follow and to understand why these other forms, other symbolic forms, follow A equals A, I'll explain now regarding the syllogism. This is the structure of the logical deduction that allows true conclusions to be reached. Now this is going to test some of you, but only those of you who prefer to follow established traditions rather than thinking for yourselves. The rest of you should recognize the truth of the following. This is the format of a true syllogism. A equals A. Reflection, is A other than A? Response, other than A is not A. A is A, therefore no. Now, the established tradition, the mistake, this is the second mistake in this video that I wish to explain, is in the mistaken use of is, that is the equal sign. What actually happens is that the first, what is called a proposition, A equals A, is mistakenly defined in a way that is presented as an absolute, but is actually not absolute. So, to explain further, A, something, is stuff related to other stuff indefinitely. So what they're doing here is saying that the identity of A is something specific, is something finite. And the issue is they're always having to look further for more information in order to define what that A is. Now, if you've ever tried to define a sentence based on defining the words in that sentence, then you'll know how impossible that process is, because every word in the sentence has definitions that relate to other words, which in turn relate to other words. So basically, the issue here is that they're saying they're mistakenly identifying a true proposition as a scientific identity. They're saying that a theory about something, a theory about the identity of something, can be a true proposition, and that's false. The established tradition of the syllogism tries to say that a scientific proposition, a scientific identity, can be combined with another scientific identity in order to come to a true conclusion, and that's evidently false, simply because any conclusion that you come to based on that process will be falsely stating a certainty about what is uncertain. I'll give you an example of the famous Socrates syllogism. This is offered by academics as an example of a syllogism. And I'll explain, further. It says all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. The mistaken use of the is here is in saying that all men are identical with mortality. And this is obviously false because, if you try to flip it around and say mortality is equal to all men, you could see how false that is. And similarly, man is not identical with Socrates, and therefore it's not a true proposition. It's a scientific theory. Now, notice please that I'm not saying that science is false. I'm saying that the proposition that is offered for an identity has to be qualified by relating it to the infinite. If you make a proposition that is relying on scientific identities, you have to qualify it and say that the identity is uncertain. Otherwise, you'll mislead yourself and come to what you think is a true conclusion, which is actually only a theory that is contingent on further data. So I would just, very obviously, if you want to try and define men as mortal, you only have to look at something like a bionic man that is programmed to repair itself and keep replicating itself without actually forming a new life. It's actually if it's continuing to repair itself without actually producing another being like itself, it could live indefinitely. So that's what I meant by replicating, not forming another one external to itself, but just itself. So, and we could say, it's a bionic man, therefore it's a man, but it's not mortal. It's a scientific identity and it's mistakenly being presented as a true proposition. So that's it. And congratulations to those of you who listened to this whole video. But there's no prize really, because what you have now is if you think about it and you understand it, you've got an understanding that goes against, say, 99% of academic philosophers who haven't really thought about it and who go off the established tradition. And so, well, good luck.